States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Okay, and next on the agenda is approval of the meeting agenda. Do we have any changes? That's the CIP?
Yes, ma'am. We do have one change we'd like to add, in item C, under new business. And under C, with new business, we want to add the Planning Commission bylaws as a item there. And those will be discussed as far as some changes that are being recommended by the town attorney. And we want you to have these ahead of time to act on next month. So we add bylaws there.
Okay, with that, do we have approval of the agenda as presented?
Make a motion to approve as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is approval of the minutes.
And Madam Chair, you received each at your places this evening a set of minutes. This is the exact same set of minutes that was in your packet that you received, except there was a typographical error on the last page that was corrected. There was an error in referencing approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is obviously not correct.
Right.
So we have amended these minutes, and that is the only change from the minutes you received in your packet.
Great, and thank you for that correction. And I just wanted to say that I had a correction too in the minutes. And it's the very top of the page of the last page, which is actually page 7 of our packet. And it says, Mrs. Luna stated that, ... I actually went and reviewed the actual recording of the meeting, and I didn't make those statements. So maybe it was attributed to previous comments that were made, but I didn't actually say these words. So I'd like to strike that paragraph on the top of page 7.
The entire paragraph?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do we agree with that? Is there any questions or concerns?
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of September 12th as amended.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I hear none. It passes. All right. So with that, we have, we'll open to public comment at 5:36. I'm not sure if we have any speakers or if there's any emails that you'd like to read into the record.
I don't have any emails that we received prior to the meeting this
Okay.
evening.
Moving right along then. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and close public comment at 5:38. And next is item number 7 on the agenda for commission reports. Do any commission members have anything to report on their committee work? Oh, well, maybe you could just talk about the meetings that, you've attended within the last quarter.
Yeah, the Economic Development Committee, our December meeting was canceled, so we'll resume work back in January. But again, just looking at parking, there was a little bit talking about the tourism of the town. I'll pull it up here. A little bit of information about what our average visitor kind of looks like. See if I can find it. Average visitor tourism is changing. What we're looking at now is the average travelers between 25 and 59, average income at $80,000. They're college educated. 56% is families with children under the age of 18. And kind of the main experiences they want is adventure sports, mountain and road biking, national and state parks, scenery, hiking, the bars, museums, and of course Kelowna Beach has this to offer to many of our events and our nightlife and daytime activities in town.
That's an awesome report. So where was that data collected?
That's a great question. In the coming months, I will get back
Okay.
on that.
I think it's very useful, really, for all the departments and everybody, really. and for, preparation when we get ready to redo the comprehensive plan. Ms. Sturts, did you want to add anything about your?
As far as resiliency, I mean, we're gonna have a presentation. There was a meeting, I think it was November 21st, for the public to come and give comments, and it sounds like they got a lot of comments, and there was a lot of one-on-one discussions going on in that meeting, so I look forward to hearing what the results of all the further input they received were.
All right, and with that, Mr. Howell, do you have any reports to make on your work on the CIP? Is he online?
He is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I was under the impression that we would be going over CIP as an agenda item.
Yeah,
Yeah, and just your monthly, I mean, if you've had meetings with staff, what kind of preparation, I just want folks to know, you're busy doing that.
Yeah, and if you want to defer this discussion, this discussion could be deferred till the CIP item since it's on the agenda
Mhm.
this evening. We did meet with Mr.
Oh, you did?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, and so was that meeting with all the departments or just?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, wonderful, very thorough meeting then. Okay. All right, with that, the commission reports are complete, and we'll move on to our special presentation. We're so happy to announce the presentation for Propelling Resiliency, Integrating Flood and Stormwater Management in Colonial Beach, final draft. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to be back with you all again. And for those of you I have not met yet, I did have the opportunity to meet some of you at the public forum, but my name is Kate Jones with Berkeley Group. And I've been part of the team working on this plan. And today I do have a presentation for y'all, which will be loaded shortly. But just as a little backdrop, we did, as Ms. Luna mentioned, we had a public forum last month, and during that public forum, we were able to have some good conversations. And in addition to that, we had the plan posted online, and then we had accepted comments for about 5 weeks. That site was open for comments. So we did get some comments, actually, I think on Friday and on Monday. That's fine. It's just a couple days late, but I've read through all of them. We've processed a lot of it. And so today I'm going to kind of give an overview of the plan, but I also really just wanted to talk about the comments because I think those are probably what people are most interested in hearing about at this time, and how we think logically we made some adjustments to the plan. Okay? All right, do I have control or no?
you do not.
Okay, that's fine. All right. So again, we have a final draft of the Propelling Resilience Plan. Like I said, we've received comments. Berkeley will be making some final adjustments to the plan based on the comments that just came in. We have already made adjustments, but if you could go on to the next slide. Let's just do a little high-level overview just to kind of remind ourselves of why this plan is important and really what it sets the town up for. As you all know, the town of Colonial Beach is vulnerable to frequent and severe flooding events, which may be further intensified by changes in the future. The purpose of this plan is to identify frequent and severe flooding issues intensified by sea levels and climate change. There are also prioritized actions and projects that have resulted out of this plan. So that's very important. It sets the town up for going after funding to further some of these projects. And this flood resilience plan is specifically a prerequisite for Virginia Community Flood Preparedness Fund. So they require that you have a resilience plan in place before you can apply for funding to fund projects. So I just kind of wanted to bring it back to that. This is setting y'all up for more funding to do the work. Thank you. We wanted to acknowledge, and this is very important, that there's a lot of previous work that's been done in this town. There's the raft project, which there's a lot of policy in there that was, very important in building on in this plan. There was the framework for coastal flood planning, both of those through UVA. There's the I&I analysis report by Dewberry in 2021. And we talked a bit about this. We'll talk a little more about this. Shoreline change analysis of the Estuarine Recreational Beach, ODU, and others. And these are all identified in the plan and introduction. All right, click one more time. There you go. Okay. So for logic, the plan is really broken up into two parts. Part one being the high level kind of flood resilience plan. We're going to talk a little bit more about what's in that based on what is required by the Virginia DCR. So that's what we're going to talk about first, and then we'll go into part two, which gets more into the details of your stormwater management in the town. Can you hear me okay? Yep, okay, great.
I had to fix the Zoom link, sorry.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to start over?
No. We're getting some high quality issues.
Okay. Next slide, please. It's probably, okay, yeah, and then, great. So importantly, the flood resilience plan meets the criteria of the Virginia DCR Community Flood Preparedness Fund's 9 criteria. So they have 9 criteria in which they want to see in these plans for approval. And if you could go to the next slide, I think it's really important to just mention these so everyone has an understanding of what's required. It must address flood hazards, and it must incorporate some mention of climate change. This is variable. They don't expect you to do fancy modeling. They want you to have an understanding of the data, the public data that's out there, and what it could potentially mean. They want you to acknowledge it. A focus on nature-based solutions. This does not mean you cannot apply for engineering solutions. It's just they want to see that you've considered nature-based solutions with some of your options. Equity considerations. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but the plan must demonstrate efforts to address equity. So looking at underserved communities, looking at economic data, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Number 5, critical infrastructure. They want you to have an understanding of where the critical infrastructure is. We do have some maps in the plan that identify critical infrastructure and potential sea level rise in the future. So kind of highlighting, okay, so you start to get a sense of where the critical infrastructure is and what could be affected first. They want to see that you've engaged the public. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And they want to see that you have prioritized action lists, which we'll talk about more as well. Number 8, integration with other planning efforts. Demonstrate alignment and integration with other local and regional planning initiatives. And as well, they want to see that you have an implementation and a funding strategy. This can mean a lot of different things, but you need to have kind of a pipeline. So in this case, there may be projects that you want to just, in January, let's get this going, let's apply for funding. Okay, I want to see that you're thinking about that. Okay, public engagement. This slide's going to look familiar to those of you that were at the public forum, but I just wanted to hit on the public engagement, that has occurred. In the beginning, towards the beginning of the project, we had an online public survey, and that was open for 4 months. We had 192 respondents total. That breakdown is there in the chart. 162 of those were residents. We also had a first public forum in the spring of 2023. And then after that, we engaged with small group stakeholder interviews. So we met with businesses, we met with residents and special interest groups, Planning Commission, and the Board of Supervisors. Oh, go back 1 second. The second public forum, which was just last month, the fall of 2024. That was our second public forum, and I think it was very well attended. And we received a lot of good information. Online comments were open for about 5 weeks, and those closed this past Friday on December 6th. And so we were able to receive comments, which was great. towards the end of, well, on December 6th. Okay. So I wanted to show you all this, this map and what this is in the plan, but also what it shows. And I think this is very important. This is taken out of a public data set called the Social Vulnerability Index. It was developed by the CDC, and it's used by a lot of different organizations to look at vulnerability. And there's a lot of factors that go into this. This is specifically looking at economic vulnerability, so it's looking at income levels. For the Virginia Community Flood Preparedness Fund, they have a criteria that if you have individuals in your community by census block that are below 80% of the area median income, they are considered low-income communities per Virginia CFPF. And the importance of that is that when you go to apply for a grant, you get a reduced match of 10%, which is it's a good thing for the town. Instead of having to meet that higher percentage of match, you only need to come up with 10%. So based on this map and based on our analysis of the data, any project, any flood-related project that you want to apply for with the CFPF, that 10% match is all you're going to have to beat. So I think that's a really important point, and I want to make sure that everyone understands that. And we've done this for a lot of our communities, and there are some that don't, obviously. Fall into this category. So, all right. I also wanted to point out that through the process of community engagement, we did engage town staff, town council, members of the Planning Commission, and the public. These were the areas of town we heard from those representative groups that were concerned flooding areas. So these are also in the plan, but I wanted to just let you know that these were the areas identified that were communicated to us that were problems. So this is kind of in addition to, you know, the map where people kind of put, you know, pinpoints in areas is more for the general public. This was what specifically we heard. And there's, the list goes on to the next page, if you don't mind. Thank you. Yeah. So this is all in the plan as well. And you'll kind of see how this kind of sets up the second portion of the plan, kind of pulling out some of this information from the public, sets up kind of the prioritization later in the plan. And to be clear, the first portion of the plan also, there are several pages dedicated to these 4 items, which are considered flood resilience actions. They are specific actions the town can take. So financial administrative actions, organizational actions, regulations and ordinances that can assist with stormwater management and flooding issues, and high-level infrastructure actions. So these are all laid out in the plan. They are, instead of being like on-the-ground projects necessarily, they are more organizational, because really this is a complicated problem. It needs to be addressed at all levels. You can't just pick projects and say, we're going to go do that. Like, you kind of need to take a step back, and we've laid out some actions here, and this is building off some of the work, the great work that came out of the RAFT report, which had a lot of this information, but we've tried to make it a little easier and more understandable to implement. So I just wanted to, and there are, real quick, in that first set, yes, we want to go after the project that was prioritized. In addition, you can take that action sheet, you can put it to your grant application, and it's going to be a valuable part of that application that lays out a lot of the good information. So those are ready to go. Okay. So part 1. Part 2 is kind of what I would call it's a stormwater management plan, but in the sense of it's a preliminary look at stormwater management in the town. You can click that next part to go. Part 2. And we had an engineering team, an engineer as part of our team, Tetra Tech, and they took that first, and then we're going to go into the comments we received online. and the public forum. Next slide. Okay, so the stormwater management plan specifically addresses deficiencies in the stormwater system, which is aging, undersized, and not adequate to handle current or anticipated stormwater volumes. So on top of that, and as many of you know, there are tidal influences from the Potomac River and Monroe Bay, which complicate issues, causing backflow and further reducing, but it is, and it's laid out, the kind of methodology is laid out, and the actual prioritization rankings are laid out in the plan. The projects that rose to the top through that prioritization process. Now, I just want to take a step back and say, these are the priorities of time, the stuff that we had, what we heard from stakeholder interviews, really be up to the town to choose what projects they want to pursue. These happen to be the top 3 prioritized at the time and the ones that we'll go into a little more detail on in this plan. But again, it's really up to the town what they would like to pursue. The 3 areas that rose to the top were Monroe Bay area at Denison Street, the Potomac River Beach Outfalls, and Virginia Avenue. Okay, so let's talk about Virginia Avenue for a minute. We know this is an important part of town. We heard this in a lot of the comments that were submitted. It started, I think, this obviously is going to, people live on this street. Of course, it's important to them. And we heard through the online comments that there was a lot of disappointment and frustration that this part was talked about, was prioritized in the larger list, but somehow I would say it got lumped into more of a shoreline, kind of management issue. So I want to take a step back, and what we've done, this is in the plan right now, and this is what we heard via stakeholder interviews, that the portion between Lincoln Avenue and Maryland Avenue and Washington Avenue and the beach experiences flooding that affects the homes along the road. The flooding is caused by undersized stormwater infrastructure and inundation from the Potomac River. Sometimes the river rises onto the end of the street, pushing sand from the beach into the stormwater infrastructure and further limiting the system's capacity. The area is shown in the red box along the eastern side of figure 2.3. You can go to the next page. So I know you all know where this is, but I just wanted to point out that in the map, it's a little tricky to see with the colors, but the map on the left, it shows you kind of the zoomed out portion, and the map on the right, where that arrow is pointing to the Virginia Avenue area. And, the red box signifies potential problem areas because a portion of it is so low. The elevation is so low there towards the water. And there are obviously some erosional issues happening as well. So all in all, yes, it is a problem area. So what we've done, next slide, please. We recognize and have come up with some conceptual solutions. The engineering team had actually done this already. So we were able to locate the information, put it back into the plan, and now it is a ranked project in the top 3 where it should be. The buried outfall on the left is, an example. There's an outfall there. It's buried in sand. It's not functional. The drop inlet on the right, you can see the sand and the sediment clogging that infrastructure. So these are some of the issues going on that road. One potential, so improving the existing stormwater system is the first step. It could include cleaning out the existing ditches. I didn't see too many ditches on that road, I'm gonna be honest. So I think maybe there used to be some small ones. I'm not sure if they got filled in, but I didn't see any. And regardless, upsizing, cleaning out the inlets, upsizing the pipe outfall, modifying the outfall so that it is no longer buried on the beach side, modifying the inlet to the beach, and very importantly, adding a tidal gate on the end of that pipe. So when you do get tidal surges and when you do get storms, that water is not pushing back up, going the wrong way. So those are going to be some of the key things that our engineering team is recommending in that area. In addition, options to expand the stormwater system could be investigated. This expansion could include adding, again, you could look in certain areas of adding small retention areas. I didn't see a lot of room for that on that road, so it may be something where, if the elevation is correct, it could be more of a French drain or something just under the surface that could collect water. We'll see. But the important thing is the solutions are back into the report as they should be, and it is ranked as a high project. Next slide. Again, just to reiterate, the solutions that were recommended, upsizing that modified pipe outfall, replace modified inlet on the beach and adding a tidal gate. Replace, upgrade, increase stormwater retention along Virginia Avenue, that could be explored. There are ways to do that, not only above ground retention, but there may have to be some more complex, depending on where the groundwater table is. So this is a really good time, I want to point out. You might be asking, well, what's there? Is there, where does the drop inlet go? One of the issues with this, when the team got into this project, is the town currently doesn't have a comprehensive spatial data set for their stormwater infrastructure. So that's a problem. That was a problem at the beginning of the project because you really can't do modeling. You can't do a lot of analysis without that data. The full data set did not exist. So the engineering team had to kind of go out, pick some areas where they could do some field investigations, but nowhere near the full spatial inventory that needs to be done. So I just want to point that out. If you're wondering, well, why don't we know what's there? It's because it's never been documented. Next slide. So Virginia Avenue is added as priority project number 3. This is in the plan. It is in the table for the stormwater CIP list. It also, the engineers are working on an estimated cost, so that will be in there as well. And again, it will be up to the town which projects that they want to prioritize. These are the recommended hotspots. Okay. Okay, so the I&I report. This was something that was talked about a lot at the public forum. The report done by Dewberry. We're very aware of your sewer system problems. What's been, the issues that you're having to address with your sewer system. And it is important to, look at these two things side by side. I think in the recommendations, we've run this by our engineering team, and what we've done is we've added a few actions to the plan that recognize the I&I report. And it's also, as I'm saying, a really good next step would be to do that full stormwater inventory. And now that you have all that good sewer data, it's going to be a lot easier to run some modeling when you have all that really good data and really have some results you can work with. So we've written that into the report, and you can, and actually I'd like to read it if you go to the next slide. There we go. Okay, so number 14 is an action in the report. So I'll read it as it's in there, or was in there, still in there like this, but we want to add some language to it. Inventory the town of Colonial Beach stormwater infrastructure to better understand flooding issues, stormwater system capacity, that's important, and stream conditions under future climate projections. So utilizing, money from the CFPF grant to the town to perform a stormwater asset inventory and assessment, so AIA, using the model, create a priority action plan of flood mitigation actions. You have a lot of those actions already. This will simply be the detail you need to know exactly what to do, okay? And adding to this, this would be an action to add, develop watershed and subwatershed hydrology and hydraulic models, often called H&H, and you guys have probably heard that before. Along with groundwater modeling. Groundwater is a really important piece of this. Groundwater levels rising, falling are very important to know. And river modeling to determine required carrying capacity for the stormwater infrastructure system. So basically this, as you start to work and prioritize areas for your sewer system, if you can have this information too, you can really start to tie those areas together and work on them concurrently. So, next up. This was also in the report. There was an action in there to conduct a vulnerability assessment of the town's wastewater treatment plant. I think just the important thing is getting it in the plan. I've seen a lot of applications, especially to federal pots of money like BRIC, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, for just these types of projects. So they're going to want to see, it's probably in other plans as well, but they're going to want to see that you've identified this and then you put this in the grant application, and it's going to be a much stronger application. So these were, in the I&I report, they identified the following pump station sub-drainage areas with the highest potential for I&I. So I think it's important, and this is going to be in the plan, to understand where these areas are, and the map on the next page will show this, but it will be important, depending on how you plan for your sewer improvements, it will be important to also understand and plan for your stormwater improvements. And so what you can do, you have this list of projects and you can kind of match them as you go, would be probably a really good thing to do to understand how they're going to work together. And again, once you have that full data set, you can run the modeling and understand a little bit more about this. The areas in red and the oval areas are where there's identified, this is from the I&I report, those problem areas for I&I. So these are the prioritized areas. So I think it's really important to have this in the plan, to understand that the importance of, it's great that you're going to update your sewer system. What happens to the rest of that water that now is not allowed to go in, which is a good thing for your wastewater treatment plant. What's going to happen on the ground? Also, vulnerable low elevation manholes in PS6 and 1 require elevation or fortification. These were kind of some main points of the plan. Strategies should integrate resilience against tidal inflow and rising sea levels. Again, it will help, especially with some of your outflows, to put some tidal gates on there, and this is all laid out in the plan with some cost estimates. But that's going to be a really important part of preventing that river water from flowing back in via those pipes. Okay. So again, just to reiterate, we've already made a lot of edits based on what we heard from the public forum. We have struck out a lot of, there was some information that I think, remember, Ms. Luna?
I do.
If there was some,
There was a part of the map that showed that there was a
Yeah,
population,
that's gone.
socially vulnerable
yeah.
population. I
Yeah.
went back to see if it was updated.
No, we haven't updated the website. Because we just got
Okay.
comments 4 days ago.
Oh, right. So I didn't notice that it had been, but
Yeah.
there's another map that's showing that as well.
Yes, so we are removing that information. In our draft, it's been removed.
Okay.
Really, the important piece of that is to focus on what the Community Flood Preparedness Fund wants to see. And what they want to know, and like I've shown y'all, is what you want to know is how you qualify for that lower match. Beyond just the important, of course, of knowing social ability in your community, that's valuable on its own. But for the purposes of securing this funding, they want to see that income piece. So that's what we've shown here. I know Mr. Knuckles had a lot of comments. There were some I just wanted to talk about right now. One was the executive summary. We revamped that, which I think reads a lot better. We've also updated some FEMA NFIP information that represents the Flood 2.0 update that went through. So all that information is updated. You won't find it on the website yet because we're still incorporating comments. But I just want to point out that all that information has been updated. Those are the two main things that I recall verbally from the meeting. And of course, we have all the written comments too. So next steps. As many of you may know, the Virginia Community Flood Preparedness Fund deadline is in January. So we're hoping that this will go to town council, plus the plan for presentation. And, we'll be providing them a fresh copy with all these edits that, we hope represents more of what you want to see in the plan, but also meets the Virginia Community Flood Preparedness Fund's criteria to set you up for success. And then concurrently, you can actually submit the plan to Virginia DCR and your project at the same time if you want to. We have already received preliminary approval from DCR, so we know they're generally happy with the plan. We don't expect any major issues. So those are kind of the next steps. And I hope this update has helped kind of clarify a few things and just give you all a sense of what we've been able to kind of incorporate into the plan a little bit more.
Well, thank you. And, I'm sure we have questions to ask. I appreciate the community meeting that was held last month. And nice to hear that error was updated with regard to identification of where that socially vulnerable population is. But one of the things that is so true that's made clear in this report is that 27% of our population is below poverty. And so we should certainly meet the criteria for residents at 80% or lower of the AMI, and have lesser requirement for matching funds as a result of that.
Correct.
I just wanted to give just a general overall, I guess, outlook on this. Our history is that the commission began working with RAFT nearly 4 years ago. And RAFT was a conglomerate of 3 different universities that got together under a Philip grant, and were able to come into communities like ours that are very vulnerable to resilient issues, flooding and stormwater and all of that. And so they did incredible mapping for us. They identified, what the impact would be with no changes in a 20, 30, 40, and 80-year period. It went on, and they did a number of things in terms of helping us craft our comprehensive plan so that we would have the language in there that we would need to qualify for these other grants. And that, so that's clearly a goal that we've had. And I see progress being made in that direction, and I'm very encouraged by that. One of the things that I was really surprised about was when we worked on the comprehensive plan, we talked about stormwater management in phases. And one of the things that we should be at like phase 3 now, and we are. However, that included the modeling that we would expect to see.
Right.
And it's difficult for us to prioritize communities, specific areas, without having that information. So it seems like we had to rely on just the public giving us, which is, public engagement is great, but it didn't include the science part of it that I would expect to see from maybe hydrology mapping and
part of that is
watershed mapping.
Yeah, and you really have to have the spatial data and inventory as a first step for that, and that does not exist.
Yeah, well, I think some of it was done. I'm not sure if it was available. I know that Tom, some of the folks from RAFT did do modeling for the North Shore. And we looked at not only was there tidal inflow, but the outflow was creating erosion there as well. So it was a double issue there.
That sounds right.
And I just say that, because I would hope that we could be further along than we are. And I guess I was hoping that I would see more of the mapping that we're going to need to not only put us in a good position to get the funding, but help us as a town be able to prepare and be ready for the oncoming deluge that we know is around the corner.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm concerned about how the priorities were achieved. But again, based on the information we got from RAFT, it seems like these are good priorities to have.
Yeah.
And, Monroe Bay, the outflows along the boardwalk area and Virginia Avenue
Yeah.
are really key places.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Well, I guess I'm trying to sort through, so there's sort of 4 priorities that you're putting forward, but then the underlying data doesn't exist, so aren't those really our first priorities?
So I think, and what we've identified in the plan, it really depends. The overall priorities we're suggesting are kind of there's larger priorities, which is definitely getting your full stormwater inventory assessment. So what is in the ground now, the sizes of your pipes, stormwater, not sewer, the sizes, the elevations of your drop inlets, these are all really critical things to know. And the only way to do that is to have a full stormwater inventory done. Now, you could also concurrently piecemeal it with each of these prioritized projects. Now, I will say the engineering team was able to go out and field locate for the prioritized projects. They were able to do visuals and say, okay, here's an inlet. So you will have that data. You will have some data out of this for those areas. So those will put those projects a little further along to potentially do something very soon next. But it's difficult when you just have a subsection of a whole system of stormwater infrastructure to really make good decisions and make sure what you do right here isn't doing something negative over here or affecting this area over here. So really our first, and this was what we thought was available with the original scope of work that was laid out, was that a full spatial data set for your stormwater inventory existed and we would have access to that. That was not the case. So we worked with what we had and we went out and field located what we could, you will now have. So you can take that data and if I'm not mistaken, and I need to check, I believe the town did apply for another pot of funding from CFPF that could potentially fund the stormwater infrastructure analysis. So I'm pretty sure, and of course I would want to ask Natasha, or well, not Ben, but that would really be the most logical next step. But we also recognize that time is of the essence, and it may also be important concurrently to start looking at these smaller areas and seeing what can be done in those locations. And we've given some conceptual ideas that could be taken, and the next step for those is construction documentation and engineering design to get them in the ground. So you need that as a next step, and that was not in the scope of work. So if that helps, but you are getting there. It's just that funding in January will be really important if you can apply for grant money for that. If that helps.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Okay, I'm still not getting there. So
Okay.
Are the funding in January, is that for the specific projects?
That's up to the town to decide. Typically,
Okay, so that, I
yeah.
think that actually explains what I'm looking for.
yeah, we have made recommendations in the report. It's up to the board to decide how they would like to proceed.
Okay.
And these are some of the hotspots and the prioritized areas would be places we would recommend starting, yes.
And then a different question would be, when do you think you actually will release an updated version of the document?
So at this point, the document is being updated with the comments we received on Monday of this week. And our plan is to have it go to the board in January, so it'll go out with that packet.
Okay.
That's our plan.
I know at the community meeting, you talked about how a lot of the similar stormwater management plans would point to different reports that are available in another section. It would just be a link. But in looking at this, would you still, at this point, be able to add some of those links, like to FEMA and to the Army Corps of Engineers? There are several agencies that have mapping that can at least help inform the process better. than this alone.
Sure,
Um,
yes, definitely, that's
yeah.
important.
Because it's not, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, a lot of this information is out there and we need to get it.
Yeah, and we will definitely add as many links as we can. There are some links in there to like the RAFT report, to some other, anything that we could find, but we'll go through, we'll do
Yeah,
another.
the Planning
yeah.
District Commission
Yes,
has a very good hazard.
the hazard
report.
mitigation plan,
Yeah.
yep, that's in there. Yeah, that's a good point. We'll make sure we put a link. It's listed in there, but let me make sure we get a link to the online version.
Mr. Mack has now joined the commission meeting. So we're going through and reviewing the report. Did you have any questions or at this point? Okay. Any further questions? And from Nathan or Mr. Christensen?
None at this time for me.
Thank you. And I did want to say, the last thing is that one of the recommendations is to provide or to build a resiliency initiative committee, if you will. And so we would, as a commission, we have our resiliency committee here, but we definitely would like to see, or at least I would like to see a resiliency initiative that's more broad-based and maybe could involve other jurisdictions,
That's a great idea.
Dahlgren, King George, Montrose, and so on,
Yes.
west of Westmoreland County.
Yeah, I think that's really important to have regional collaboration.
Yes,
So you feel like you're not just working by yourselves, you can
Yeah.
learn from some of the others.
because our problems don't just start at the
That's right.
borderlines of the
Yeah.
town.
That's gonna be
So,
really important.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
And so we'll move along next. Do we have any discussion of that, or should we just move on to the next item? All right, so with that, we'll move on to old business and the work plan.
I included for you the work plan that we discussed last month, and in that item, it was at the end of the meeting, we had a lot of different discussions going on, and I don't think that we actually finished the discussion on the plan, so I wanted to provide this version again that staff had given to you relative to your plan, updating it to say it's your 25-26 work plan, not, as it stated before, 24-25. I went ahead and left the 10 items on here that staff had proposed before. I know there was a little bit of thing back and forth about well, some of these priorities might change. There may be some other projects that come up, and that's of course with any of our years, we get certain tasks given to us at the planning commission level from council, and we may see that again coming from them. But we do know that now, there is the top 3 items that have been specifically recommended, or top 2, and then the third is relative to variances and appeals, which is on your agenda. So that's actually really is going to move up to task 1, because we're ready for you to talk about in just a little bit having a public hearing on amendments to Article 17, variances and appeals. But so I'd like for you to take this, think about it. If you want to offer any comments, certainly email them to me, and be ready to discuss this at your January meeting so we can hit the ground running when 25-26 with our work plan. I still envision us keeping the interviews with and getting input from stakeholders relative to FAR and as a top priority, and also getting input relative to any stakeholders in the Economic Development Committee, going in and getting their comments relative to the draft zoning text amendment that we have on the table relative to parking. So I'd like to get your input on some of these other items